Guys, we've got something really interesting to share with you today. And I'm not exaggerating by saying that this might be one of the most interesting EVs that's looking to make its way into production that we've seen and covered in a very, very long time. That's right. This right here is Nobe. And just tell me you don't want one of these. What's up, motorheads, and welcome back to Gearbox Pizza. And that's right, today we're looking at one of the most interesting modern / classic designs being worked on right now at any price. And believe it or not, this is the product of these crazy cats out there in Estonia. Yes, Estonia. Now, don't write this thing off yet as just some vaporware, because they're actually serious about producing these guys, not just for some lucky Estonians, but for the world market, and yes, that is including the US of A. Now, how's that for some good news? Now, far too often I'll find some obscure little gem in the auto world only to find out that there's literally no chance of me ever getting my filthy little paws on one of those things in America. Now, remember the Honda E, for example? Yeah, well, I guess that sort of worked itself out, seeing as the production version was just like nowhere near as cool as a concept car. But whatever, there's plenty of other examples. So part of the reason this will actually end up being sold here in the States is because of the number of wheels. And if you haven't noticed just yet, yep, it's missing one. 3 wheels on this thing. Now, because it's a 3-wheeler, it's not technically classified as a car. Rather, it's an autocycle. Because it's not technically a car, it's not subject to the same safety standards and crash testing and all that stuff. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it's not safe, as it does have some safety features. Firstly, and believe it or not, there's airbags, but not traditional airbags that are jammed into the steering wheel and dashboard. These airbags, well, they're built into the seat belts, which is kind of cool. And the best part about that is that you can still manage to have airbags while using that super old school steering wheel. That's so cool. All right. Oh, and there's also like a roll cage and crumple zones apparently, so hey, right on. There's also a traction control and stability system, along with this thing being all-wheel drive. Yep, 3-wheel drive. There's also an air suspension, and all these things together should alleviate that whole 3-wheelers just sort of tip over thing that we've seen. Although to be fair, those death traps are generally set up the other way around, with 1 wheel up front and 2 in the back. Alright, so it's coming stateside, sweet, and it's probably more or less safe enough. So let's talk about styling. Now, this really isn't styled to be a modern interpretation of a classic design. This is a classic design. Now, this is the sort of thing that a modern design would reference, if that makes any sense. I mean, take a look at an old Mustang or Mini Cooper, for example, and now let's take a look at their modern retro-styled versions. Yeah, see, the Nobe looks and feels much more like an original old-school design. I mean, just take a look at this interior. The steering wheel, the gauge cluster, oh, and this giant glass roof. Yep, that's pretty cool. And this is one of those design trends we're sort of loving right now. So everybody, if you're listening, more giant glass roofs, please. So how crazy charming is this thing, right? Look, I know it's Estonian, but to me this looks like super vintage Alfa Romeo, like all the way up front, and out back sort of has that like little boat thing. It's kind of like what I imagined George Clooney puttering around on the waters of Lake Como. I don't know. Yeah, look, this just sort of feels like the kind of thing that would require a very interesting pair of sunglasses to pull off, or I don't know, look, hey, maybe you're confident enough not to care, so right on. So, you know what else is cool? This little fella is going to be offered as a convertible also. Again, we sort of just need more electric convertibles out there. And well, hey, look, if I didn't mention this thing is fully electric, but more on that in a minute. All right, look, before we keep going, I can actually sort of feel the skepticism through the screen. And look, I know, there's been a lot of really interesting car shops that throw together some really interesting designs, and they raise a bunch of money through investment or crowdfunding, and they'll build a prototype or two only to go bankrupt within like 18 months. And who knows, maybe Nobe will follow the same path, but they really seem to be taking all the right steps to actually pull this off. You see, Nobe teamed up with Monroe and Associates here in the States to create Nobe USA, and then they teamed up with a company called FAR to create Nobe UK. Now, I don't know a ton about FAR, but Monroe and Associates, well, they're not only real, it's the home of the legendary Sandy Monroe. Sandy calls this thing the most elegant and well-designed 3-wheeler ever to see the light of day. which coming from Sandy is like, well, sort of a big deal. All right, so we're gonna take a slight detour for a second because I really have to show you this thing. And if you're already digging Nobe, well, get ready to sort of fall in love, because this right here is the Nobe 500, and I'll just say it, I love this thing. That's right, 3 loves. That's right, 3 loves. So there's not exactly a ton of info available on this fella, but we were able to find some. So apparently we should be finding out much more this summer, but for now, well, it's an all-electric little old school truck. It even has those wood extensions in the bed. Inside it looks like there's a simple bench seat that probably tops out for like 2 passengers, but that's plenty. And look, we're gonna hop back to the other car in a second, but if you guys want to see more about this fella in particular, leave a comment down below and we'll see what we can do. All right, anyway, back to our main event right here, and I think it's time to start talking some numbers. So the battery is big enough, I think, for something this size. It's coming in at 25 kilowatt hours, which is good enough to move this thing about 160 miles, which is plenty for something like this. All right, so power-wise, we're looking at just under 100 horsepower, but keep in mind, this thing is super light. It's actually really light, 1,650 pounds in fact. So that 100 horsepower is good enough to get this thing to 60 in about 6 seconds, and maybe just a little bit under. With the top speed, we're looking at about 90 miles an hour. It's like, all right, not exactly a Tesla Roadster, but those numbers all feel fine. So, there's plenty to make this thing a serious ride. I mean, dare I say, if you wanted, this could be your daily driver. Although, I wouldn't want to take any serious road trip. You know what, I probably would, but I just wouldn't recommend it to anybody I cared about. All right, so what exactly is the competition for this thing? Well, this might be tough to answer, as there's really just not that many cool 3-wheelers on the market, let alone electric 3-wheelers, but there are some, or there's going to be some. There's the Aptera, which is also really cool, but for very different reasons. So while the Nobe is looking at our past for inspiration, the Aptera is just like straight up Jetsons. And then there's the Vanderhall Edison, which is actually similar in a few ways. And look, there's also a new Edison coming out apparently, so we'll cover that later. But both are super cool, and to be honest, I'm just not sure which one I would really prefer. I mean, look, price-wise, they're both looking to be around 40 grand, which might seem like a lot for something like this, but then again, this slice of the market is just so thin that those of you that are really looking for something like this, well, that's just what it's gonna cost you. I mean, it's really hard to define what the value is here because there's just so few players. In other words, it sort of just costs what it costs, and look, they're gonna sell everyone they can make anyway. So that's Nobe, a bizarre Estonian sweetheart of a design, and love it or hate it, we just kind of need more of these things out there. And personally, I kind of love it, but I also am kind of more excited about the truck.